good night's sleep. Good morning, Spencer. I gotta tell you, Spencer, I found a nice cure for insomnia this today, and it's because I was watching this movie called The Crow 2024. Okay, I think I already gave up what I thought about this movie. And no surprises there. I could finish the vlog at once because you actually got the idea, but what's the point of making a vlog when I'm supposed to talk about it? So, okay, let's get things out of the way before I talk to you. Is that okay? The Crow. I'm not gonna lie. I I was never kind of like very attached to the franchise of The Crow. I never read the comic, and admittedly, I never saw the movie that stars Brandon Lee in it. But I know a lot about the notoriety of this movie. For one, many people talk about that this movie is pretty good and all this stuff, and well, if we have to address the elephant in the room, The Crow is also well known for, of course, having the unfortunate fatal accident that killed off Brandon Lee, which it kind of brought up the question about the legitimacy about gun props and all that stuff. It's kind of like a big scene that I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but let's say that long story short, there was some kind of miscalculation here and there with the gun props, and well, it caused us a fatal accident that killed off Brandon Lee. Funny thing that years later, history might repeat kind of itself about what was it with Alec Baldwin's crew and all this stuff. You know the same. But basically, the Crow has both that good and at the same time bad reputation of it. But still, I didn't watch it. I don't know. Maybe it always flies out around my radar, or I didn't care enough about it. But you know what? I actually now reserve the movie because I want to see it for myself. It's still not in the library, but once it's there, I'm gonna pick it up. But I do admit that I saw on television the sequel, Crow City of Angels, and people say that it's bad, but to be honest, I kind of forgot it. I forgot it. But I did remember liking it fine, but it's mostly because I didn't know better. I thought that I was actually watching The Crow itself. But no, I wasn't sure about this, and then nowadays, well, in this day and age in which people are picking up old IPs to remake or reboot a franchise, which again, I'm not 100%. I get the idea as long as it does things right and all this stuff. It's a double-edged sword. I already talked a bit about this, but honestly, The Crow, I didn't kind of go like really, really raging against the trailer because I wasn't the kind of guy saying that, oh, they're gonna overshadow the great movie that it was The Crow or with Brandon Lee and all this stuff. No, I wasn't like that kind of guy, but I do admit that was a boring trailer. I was mostly curious about the people's reaction to it, and I did find out that it was really kind of like a boring trailer that really felt like a boring movie. And Bill Skarsgård, his makeup, he kind of wanted to make the emo version of the Joker from Suicide Squad, which is it's still up to this day. That's the worst Joker you could ever see, and I don't know why Warner Brothers keep trying to pull out, that Jared Leto Joker thing. Yeah, the Jared Leto thing. But anyway, after that trailer happened, the movie kind of felt forgotten. I bet that up to this day, people kind of forgot that there was going to be a Crow remake up to this day, made by Lionsgate. And that Lionsgate, I do have kind of like mixed feelings about this. Sometimes it comes up kind of like the most edgy movies that you could get to. Some of them are interesting, like the Saw movies for the most part. And sometimes you get boring movies like what can be coming to my mind? Oh yeah, that Punisher movie. What was it? I forgot the subtitle, but anyway, I just finally watched 2024, and you saw me, and like I said, that movie is boring, and I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more. This is probably one of the most boring movies I have ever seen. Right to this day now, I hear people saying that it's one of the worst movies of the year. But come on, you just kind of like survived 2 weeks ago with Borderlands. Still haven't seen it. I don't think I might. And trust me, I at least, how can I say, Phantom Web, it was fascinating. And of course, the American Society of Magical, what, that was still kind of like insulting. But The Crow it is indeed gonna be one of my worst movies of the year. Probably middle tier, considering that this movie was such a bore and such a slugfest and so uncaring and soulless that honestly, this is one of those in which maybe after a week or so, it's gonna disappear out of my head. This is a very, very forgettable movie, to the point that it is nice insomnia. No, insomnia cure. I wanted to fall asleep, and even if the more times I wanted to struggle and see if there's something good about this movie, I couldn't. There were some things that I can nitpick. I would think some of the weird stuff that happens. But you know what? You can blame probably this movie is technically gonna blame that there's some production hell stuff happening, behind the scenes here and there. But honestly, this is whenever there is a production hell here and there, that doesn't excuse that. Still, the final product came out like pretty bad. It's almost like, for example, people trying to defend, how can I say, the Thief and the Cobbler, and the movie came out like a disastrous final product. The behind the scenes, it's still not good. Okay, let's go emphasize about The Crow. From what I can gather and remember, The Crow is kind of like this underworld gothic. I kind of struggle to say superhero, but it's more like kind of like an anti-hero movie about this guy who he can jump from the world of the dead to the world of the living. And he cannot be killed, and he's known as the Crow because of the black getup, and he's always followed by crows. If I'm wrong, excuse me, but let's pretend that I went to see this movie with a fresh mind, as someone who has absolutely almost no knowledge of The Crow. I probably might know some basics here and there, but this is more like I learned by hearsay. But here's the thing: the movie it centers around kind of like this city that is kind of like a neighboring city of Gotham City, in which everything is dark and broody. This film centers around this woman who she gets kind of like an incriminating video from a friend in which it kind of reveals something horrible. She gets it from her smartphone, and then of course some people they just follow her, and well she gets put into rehab, and where she meets our main protagonist with Eric. And both of them they fall in love. They escape rehab. They try to make a living until her path followed her, and then these mafia guys they kill them both. And then of course the protagonist Eric, he just apparently he had the. It's gonna sound stupid the more I think about it. He apparently has the power of love, and her love is intense over her, that he apparently somehow gets the power of immortality. As long as he keeps loving her, he gets the power to go back to the world of the living, and he kind of becomes immortal. He cannot be killed, but still he can feel the pain. And apparently he finds some dude in this kind of like limbo, in which kind of looks like an empty train station, an empty subway station. More train, because it's kind of like open field. But the thing is that the guy tells him that if he wants to save and bring back his lover back to life, he has to kill the people responsible for their death. And of course it is all these gangsters which are led by this evil guy played by Danny Houston. And that's the basic of The Crow. This is kind of like a revenge movie. It's a pretty much by the book revenge movie, in which on paper wouldn't be so bad, but the whole execution was so boring and so much of a slug. So much that the whole thing about the Crow thing, the moment in which the movie finally kicks in on its plot, you have to wait almost like 20 minutes for that to happen, because the whole first 20 minutes is kind of like a whole setup of uninteresting things happening, in which they wanted to play out kind of like in chronological order of the events, but it could have worked if things kind of are interesting, but it doesn't help, with the whole thing about the acting and some of the baffling things. But if there's one thing that I will always remember about this movie, probably, is the scenes of rehab. The scenes of the rehab is probably one of the gayest things I have seen, because I'm maybe wrong, but please, what kind of rehab? What rehab? You have all the people who are in rehabilitation, all of them are dressed up in pink pajamas. I'm serious. Everybody, man, woman, whatever, and they're all, it's kind of mixed. The man and the woman are all inside. They're all from rehab, and they all dress up in those pink pajamas. It's almost like this rehab center is gonna turn into the biggest and probably the most gayest slumber party you're gonna see. I mean, this pajama looks so comfortable, and also, what rehab have a projection center that looks exactly like a movie theater room? I'm serious. This is something that I will always remember. The whole pink, and considering that this is a movie that apparently fascinates emo people, this is out of place. It's so out of place to see all of them dressed in pink pajamas. I haven't even gotten too much about this movie. Let's go with the acting. The acting is as emo as you can tell. Everyone is kind of like, I'm brooding, I talk like this, rarely emotion. But it's kind of, I can't say it's abysmal cringy, but it's boring, abysmal cringy. It's almost like watching one of those Twilight movies. And honestly, probably people might get a kick out of this, although I don't get it. When I tried to watch the first Twilight movie, I was bored. I fell asleep. This is kind of like the kind of boring thing that I fell asleep, and none of the acting worked. And it doesn't help that most of the characters are so forgettable, and unmemorable that you don't know who to root for. You can't even root for the main characters, like Bill Skarsgård, in which I know he can do good. We saw him this year on Boy Kills World, and you can tell the guy can act. But man, you kind of don't care. You don't know even much about this character. The only glimpse about his past that we've seen at the beginning of the movie is that apparently he felt bad for seeing a white horse who died because the horse it got tangled on spike wires, and the whole movie kind of wanted to make you believe that there is kind of like this intense love between him and the girl who is played by, is that her name? FKA Twigs. That's a pseudonym. I think she might be a singer, but her acting was also kind of like abysmally boring. Considering that both they really wanted to act like they wanted to be on a porno, but probably in the most boring porno you can ever imagine. Kind of like Twilight. Yeah, like Twilight. And they wanted to hammer you in that they're in love and that their love is powerful, but you don't buy it. You feel like they wanted to have some chemistry, but the chemistry was so boring that you don't buy it. It's almost like there's kind of like these characters that they just kind of like met. They just go there, and then of course you kind of feel like there's some kind of like connection and arc out of there. Although to its credit, it does a better job than the awful chemistry of Justice Smith and that woman from the American Society of Magical Whatevers. But that's not saying much. It's still boring. And apparently the movie kind of wants to hammer down that the love between him and her is so powerful that transcends barriers and even death itself. You're gonna go with that. There has to be some some better way. Build it up, because people tend to overestimate love and say kind of like it's the most powerful thing ever, and it is, but when done right, or else you're gonna come up as kind of like really hammy Care Bear kind of like logic. And then the other actor who makes a little bit of an impact is Danny Houston, in which he played kind of like the bad guy from a police TV series, and the guy comes up kind of like hammy and ways creepy. He was kind of like creepy, like one of those Hollywood executives that have kind of like ulterior motives. Especially when they say that he's kind of like some kind of demon or some kind of guy who deal with the devil to have power. It never built up into that. The most that I remember about this guy is that when he wants to play with his victim, apparently he has the power of suggestion, and whenever he wants to suggest someone, he just creepily gets into the ear of that person. Like for example, I'm gonna make the example with Spencer. he just creeps behind that victim, and he goes, and there's that sound effect like that, and then he goes like, no, seriously, that's is creepy. That is creepy. He goes like this, and that makes the person kind of get into a hypnotic trance, and commits suicide. Probably this is another thing that I might remember apart from those pink pajamas. That how creepy, how kind of like creepy Danny Houston was in that movie. And yeah, let's continue on. I've seen people giving a little bit of a pass on the, how can I say, the choreography of the action scenes, but look, anyone can do that. Any Hollywood professional can do that. Let's not jump into it. And this is no special. It's a little bit bloodier, from I can tell, but most of the action scenes were honestly boring. Probably the only good action scene that you could say with this movie is the one that happens in the opera house. But still, you have to wait for a long trenches of expositions, boring stuff. That was it worth it? Was it worth it? I can't even say if the special effects are kind of like good. I'll say, and nothing. I'm gonna say. Nothing. It's just kind of like all emo stuff. I mean, even it's so dark and so emo that even Shadow the Hedgehog in his crowning achievement of edgelordship, he will say that, dude, liven up. Seriously, it's and by the way. Yeah, those are mostly kind of like the action scenes. Even the storytelling pacing is kind of like incoherent. It's so incoherent that the whole thing doesn't kind of like make sense. It doesn't. The rules of the whole thing, it's mostly kind of like exposition, and it kind of overly relies on that power of love thing that it can easily, break. And there's some choppy editing that feels like it's missing. And well, the pacing, it's such a slug that you want to wait things to happen, but doesn't feel like there is kind of like a big payoff. And yeah, and again, some of the action scenes at the opera house kind of makes up because that's the part that it gets more violent and gory, but it comes to kind of like too late, I'll say. There's not much I have to say, but there is one thing that I do want to establish. This one probably also had one of the worst endings of this year. There is a terrible ending of Madame Web. There's also the terrible ending of the American Society of you know what. But this one also comes kind of like a contender of worst endings that there is. And the thing that the ending makes it terrible is that it leaves you more confused than getting answered. It almost feels like, what the hell happened? It's almost, I haven't seen the original, but I know that the original also had to, to be a little bit more creative in order to make a movie work without the involvement of the main actor, who unfortunately passed away on a tragic circumstance. That still kind of makes me watch the first movie to see why people kind of like this movie when it feels like a movie in stitches. But this one, it feels like it was made with stitches. That is with the cheapest material you could ever imagine, and that proven, like the ending where you get confused. it doesn't exactly tell you what happened, but also it doesn't need to. But either way, it was like, what the hell is going on? What is this? And it leaves you with a sense of dissatisfaction that it was like, what? And you know what? At this point, ever since the last week, I decided to try to serve as an example. And I want to adopt the mannerisms of Japan, where you're gonna stay during all the way through the ending credits. It doesn't matter if it has to be MCU film. But and I did that. This is probably the first time I did that in a long time. And during the whole time, I was like pondering, what was up with that ending? Was that bore fest? Was that bore fest worth it? All this? No. This is, and well, that's my vlog about the Crow 2024. The best way I can say is that it kind of made me reflect that probably the problem with emo movies is that it kind of showcases emos as the most boring people there is. I can't even say goth, because honestly goth stuff has something interesting, but this is so emo that it was just boring. It's one of the most boring things I have seen in this year. So with that, I have nothing to say. So if there's a chance that I ain't gonna watch this movie again, well, to quote someone popular, quotes the raven or the crow, nevermore.